Let's get on with the beginning of the summit, which is the state of the project. So, what's new since the last summit? We've had 2 releases in the last year, VuFind 2.4 and 2.5. I'd say it's, for the most part, been sort of maintenance type of work. We've upgraded our dependencies to take advantage of PHP 5.4 and its new language features. We've gotten up to the latest version of Solr 4, the latest Zen framework. We do have some new features that I think are nice. We have a permission system, which is not yet being heavily utilized, but which will allow a lot more control over access to various elements of the VuFind system. We have the beginnings of some code generation tools that help automate some of the more painful aspects of creating and overriding plugins in VuFind. We've just introduced text domains to the translation system, which will enable us to create more context in our language files and hopefully better manage those. And of course, many, many minor enhancements, little features, and bug fixes, and so forth. We've also at last deprecated the blueprint theme, which served us very well for a few years, but in the face of Bootstrap and responsive design, had grown a little bit old. And in the interest of making maintenance less painful, we decided to say farewell. So goodbye, blueprint theme. I will not miss you too much, but you helped us along the way. I also think there's been a significant trend in the last year in sort of a shift in the way our development tools have been used. GitHub has been used very heavily with most of our conversation and work happening in pull requests, as opposed to Jira tickets, which were sort of the driver of the project in past years. We've also begun using Travis for continuous integration in addition to Hudson. And this has provided a really useful first line of defense for detecting problems in pull requests and so forth. And with the help of the very nice PHP CS fixer tool, we've further standardized our code styles without actually having to do any work because the tool just formats the code for us. So all of those have been good things, and I expect that we will continue to use these new tools. So with that behind us, the next question becomes, what's next? And a few things are coming down the road pretty soon. We have major updates to some of VuFind's key dependencies coming that are going to require some changes. And since we're going to have to make these changes because of dependencies, it provides an opportunity for some other project restructuring. Also, I'd like to continue moving in the direction of getting rid of old code. And all of this leads into a discussion of semantic versioning. I've been very attached to the number VuFind 2 because VuFind 1 and VuFind 2 are very different. And I've wanted to differentiate VuFind 2 as a separate project. But the disadvantage to that is it doesn't enable us to use semantic versioning in the truest sense. Semantic versioning being, the number of your project conveys how much has changed. So if you make backward-breaking changes, you increment the major number. If you just add new features, it's a minor number. Bug fixes, more minor still, so forth. We've sort of been doing that, but maybe not doing that as well as we could, largely because I've been very attached to VuFind 2. But I think VuFind 2 has been around long enough now that we can probably just start talking about VuFind and maybe, just maybe, pretend that VuFind 1 never even happened. So to that end, I think we are ready to start talking about VuFind 3 and also to move into a future where that number goes up more frequently in a more meaningful way because there will just be a VuFind product. There won't be VuFind 1 and VuFind 2 to the same extent. So a big part of what I'm hoping to do at this summit is to start talking about VuFind 3 and beyond and drawing a roadmap of what work we want to do, who's willing to help with the work, what the next steps are to get us to VuFind 3 and onward. And so for the rest of this presentation, I'm just going to talk about some of the points that are in my mind about what we should do and where we should go. I hope that we will discuss all of this and more this afternoon when we have our road mapping session and actually start writing down what we're going to do and who's going to help do it. But for now, I just want to get the ideas going. So sit back and listen to me ramble. So first of all, I alluded to dependency updates. And the two most obvious dependency updates are, first of all, right now we're on Zen Framework 2, and Zen Framework 3 is coming out. Fortunately, just as I don't view VuFind 3 being a shocking change from VuFind 2, Zen Framework 3 is not a shocking change from Zen Framework 2. Essentially, they're making things more modular, so it's a less monolithic framework. It's instead components that interoperate. And it's also going to raise the PHP version requirements again, which is entirely reasonable given that PHP 5.4 is no longer being supported, and PHP 7 is very near and with some exciting new features. So we're going to have to move forward to stay in line with everybody else. Also significant is Solr 5. As I said, we're on the latest Solr 4 right now, and Solr has not changed a lot in the last several versions in terms of how it is run and deployed. But Solr 5 changes things quite significantly. Solr is no longer distributed as a WAR file that you deploy in a Java container. Instead, it's designed more as a standalone service of its own with its own start and stop scripts and its own tools. And in my opinion, this is a step in the right direction for a number of reasons. But it requires us to treat Solr a little bit differently in VuFind. Our scripts can't work the same way as they used to. And so we're going to have to make some changes to integrate Solr 5 seamlessly into the project. So for all of these reasons, this alone, by semantic versioning standards, is enough for VuFind 3 because we're going to be changing some of the tools that are fundamental to running VuFind, and we're going to be changing the underlying dependencies. Logically speaking, it's not going to be a lot different, but it can't be completely identical and completely backward compatible. Another issue that gets discussed a lot and that is on my mind is the issue of dependency management. So right now, VuFind, of course, has a lot of dependencies, Zen Framework being the most obvious, but also a handful of other libraries. And the strategy that we've been following thus far is to use Composer to load the dependencies, but then to commit all of the dependencies in the vendor directory into our VuFind GitHub repository. This is not a common or best practice by developer standards. The reason that we do it is to make VuFind easier to work with for people who are not developers, because you can simply check out the Git repository and it runs. No dealing with Composer, less chance of some minor version change causing one person's VuFind installation to have a slightly different dependency than someone else's, etc. However, I think eventually that strategy is not going to work for us anymore because it makes the GitHub repository heavy and it makes development a little clumsier. So I think we need to think about whether there's a better compromise, that we can have a way to make installation painless and easy for everyone, but also to have our development process follow more conventional standards for the PHP community today. And this may be as simple as having two repositories, one of which is just everything, and the other is where the actual development happens. But it's something to strategize over. And sort of tied to this is also the question of bundling Solr. You know, we've had Solr packaged in with VuFind from the very beginning, and when Solr was a more obscure tool, this made a whole lot of sense because otherwise you have to figure out how to install Solr. But with Solr 5 being a standalone service, I think we may start to see Solr being a standard package in a lot of operating systems and distributions. And if that comes to be, perhaps it makes less sense to have it bundled. Or perhaps we want to think about having, again, VuFind Lite that doesn't have this stuff in it, and VuFind Full that has everything all ready to go. And again, this really comes down to discussing with the community what makes sense, because I think we have some conflicting priorities between the development side and the deployment side. Perhaps a minor point, right now our command line tools are kind of crazily coded because I wanted our VuFind 2 command line scripts to look and behave exactly the same as VuFind 1s. And if we're going to go to VuFind 3 and break some backward compatibility, maybe we rename our scripts and use Zen Framework more conventionally so we can get rid of some crazy hand-wavy magic that is only there to make things look the same as VuFind 1 did. But again, that would cause some inconvenience for some people, so something to think about. Perhaps more exciting than all of this basic logistical stuff is redesign of more fundamental parts of the project. We have many years' worth of organic growth in our configuration files. Perhaps there are some places where things could be rearranged or renamed to be more comprehensible. Though again, there's a lot to be said for maintaining backward compatibility, an area where we can have conversations. Again, our ILS driver interface has had many features piled on top of it over the years. There may be some areas where it's overcomplicated and could be simplified if we're willing to break some backward compatibility. Probably my least favorite part of the VuFind design that I'm responsible for is the nesting dolls of options, params, and results objects in the search system. I still feel there's got to be a way to break those pieces apart in a more logical way for a better object structure. I want to keep looking at that and thinking about that. Our record driver hierarchy. Right now, almost everything inherits from Solr default, whether or not it has anything to do with Solr. That is clearly wrong, but it's very convenient. So we may be able to find some ways to break that apart and restructure it so that it's more logically sound. And language files. As I mentioned earlier, we now have text domains in the language files, which allow us to scope things and separate things out by module. It may make sense to do some of that work, particularly something that's sort of been on the back burner for years now is getting VuFind involved with the Translate Wiki community, which is an open source group that does translations for open source projects if you submit your text strings to them in a fairly well-organized, standardized way. And I've been thinking if we can just get some ugliness out of our language files, we could participate in Translate Wiki and probably add some more languages to the project. The problem is that here at Villanova, we only use English, so it's hard for me to justify devoting large amounts of my time to massively restructuring our internationalization files. But for those at institutions where internationalization is a higher priority, I would love to work with you to make it cleaner and better to maintain. Create more Zen Framework modules to make the core VuFind module lighter. Right now, we pretty much have one giant module with all of our stuff jammed into it. There's a lot of things in there that the majority of people don't need to use. It would be nice to break it apart and perhaps have a configuration step where you turn on the pieces that you actually need. I think that would improve performance, and the greater modularity would make the code base less intimidating. And we may be able to take that a few steps further, but that's at least some place to start with breaking apart the monolith. As I mentioned, we have a new permission system. We're not using it much. I think we should think about more comprehensively how we want to deal with roles and permissions in VuFind. We have some heavyweight controllers that are doing more stuff than a controller should. Again, an opportunity to refactor, create reusable components, make things more readable and testable. We've got an ugly Ajax handler. We could probably fix that. And also look at opportunities for putting more event systems into the code for separation of concerns and cross-cutting concerns being handled better. We have events in the search system, but there are some other areas where, for example, there's a pull request in progress now for creating a record cache so that if somebody saves a record to their favorites, we can actually cache that record locally to make the favorites perform better, and also to allow favorites lists to persist even if source data goes away at a third-party provider. But looking at some of the code that makes this happen, there's a lot of copy and paste going on and weird things in weird places. It all seems like if it were based on events being triggered at key moments, it might be cleaner. But event systems are tricky, so again, this is all brainstorming. I don't want to completely change everything to event-driven code. As all of this other stuff changes, we need to think about documentation. Right now, we sort of have the VuFind 1 documentation and the VuFind 2 documentation, and they're cross-referenced with one another. I think we probably are safe to start further de-emphasizing some of the VuFind 1 documentation, though clearly it shouldn't go away entirely as people are still using that code. But also, we should think about how to maintain the documentation to be more fluid going forward as the software evolves. And of course, the question is, are there any glaring omissions? Documentation always gets neglected. I'm pretty proud of some of the work we've put into documenting VuFind, but it's probably been a couple of years since I've put a really heavy effort into reviewing all of it and making sure it's up to date. So I'm sure that there are places where it could be further improved. Also, as we do work to improve and refactor the code, we should think about code quality. Our test coverage is better than it was when we didn't have any code coverage in our tests, but there's lots of room for improvement. Perhaps we should set some goals for test coverage while refactoring. You know, if you're going to pull out a large chunk, maybe we need to have a target percentage on that. Also, we have a lot of PHP mess detector warnings that you can look at in our Jenkins, which basically just calls out areas where functions are too large and complex or classes have too much going on within them. So that's also a metric that we can watch and perhaps key some of our work to, just trying to reduce those obvious problem areas. And deprecation, as I said, maybe there are some things we can get rid of. And I think we should think critically about what it's safe to get rid of. I feel very strongly about supporting people who are using the software, and I don't want to pull the rug out from under anyone or break anything important. But at the same time, if keeping something around just in case somebody needs it halts the momentum of the project, then we're not doing anyone any favors. So I think it may be worth thinking about more aggressively, you know, putting out a call for, does anyone really need this thing? And if not, it goes. Particularly, we have some ILS drivers that are not being maintained. And also, there's the jQuery mobile theme, which right now we use at Villanova, so I'm not in a hurry to get rid of it. But it's using an outdated version of jQuery mobile. Upgrading it to a current version is a huge amount of work, and perhaps the Bootstrap 3 responsive theme addresses most of the use cases. So it becomes a question of cost versus benefit. So I'm not proposing we axe it right now, but maybe down the road it can go. And that was actually all I had for structured presentation. But since you have me standing up here and it's about 20 minutes until we officially do the next talk, if you'd like to do open questions. Or perhaps it would be worthwhile to go around the room and introduce ourselves, since we don't all know each other and it's a small enough group that perhaps it would be interesting to see what everyone is working on. So when we're working together later, we can find opportunities for collaboration. So I'll start with questions first. So you can ask me questions to delay being put on the spot to introduce yourself. And if nobody asks me any questions, then I'll make you talk to me. How about that?
If no one else has any questions, I would like to just interrupt the current flow with asking if there is any way to register the wireless network without having a US cell phone number.
I heard some discussion about the issue of getting on the wireless without a US cell phone number. Did we have a solution?
Yeah, use a cell phone with somebody in the United States.
Well, we just use that number, I guess.
Yeah,
right?
we can reuse it.
But not even the phone number, just the...
So, Dave, you want to write this down? I didn't want to renew the process using my username because I didn't want to kick you off the network in case our password changed. So you're the username and I'm the password, if you're okay with that setup.
Actually, do you want to just write it on a nice...
password.
And I guess we'll find out how many concurrent users can use the same username and password.
This is our security audit for the day.
My name is Yongmin Wang. I'm from the College of New Jersey, which is about a 1 hour drive from here. We are a new institution. We just installed the VuFind last month. Right now, we are collecting the feedback from all the library staff and going to do some customization in the next couple of months. So we target our launch day in January.
Okay.
I just got a question when you talk about the mobile, jQuery mobile stuff. The new VuFind, is that mobile compatible? Do we need to do anything? People want to use cell phone to browse the...
Yeah, so the state of VuFind is that by default, it has a responsive theme. So if you access it on a cell phone, it should adjust automatically. But there's an optional feature where you can turn on mobile detection, and it will actually load a completely different theme for mobile users. So we still have that optional feature in place, but it's not turned on by default. But if
the configure file?
right. I think it's called mobile theme or something similar to that.
How people, I mean, that, how popular is it? I mean, how many people using that mobile thing?
I know we have a couple of users. As I say, we use it here, and the reason we use it here is that the university has their own mobile site, and so we wanted our library's mobile experience to match the university's in look and feel, so thus we created this custom thing. And it does have some advantages. You can highlight the particular features that users are likely to want on their mobile device, like what are the library's hours, make that very prominent, and so on. Though you can do that too through the responsive design with custom theming. But again, I feel like probably in another year or two, the separate mobile site is going to look really dated, and at that point we may revisit how to approach it. We don't have any other questions. I guess I can introduce myself. I'm not sure if I did that. I'm Demian Katz. I developed VuFind here. Can I put you on the spot, Judy?
Sure. My name is Judy Drescher. I'm the library director and sort of systems person at Illinois College in Long Island. We have VuFind 2, well, whatever the latest is, we've got it. And we've been running it, I think we went live January of 2 years ago.
I'm John Hauser. I'm the CIO of the Historical Society of Pennsylvania. We use VuFind for both our main discovery system and for genealogy databases. We'll be talking a little later.
I'm Brad Patton. I'm a software engineer with EI Network. We provide all of the technology solutions for the Carnegie Library of Pittsburgh system and just about every other library in Allegheny County. We're currently running a derivative of VuFind Plus, which is your VuFind 1, which you are very interested in getting rid of, and so are we. We're in the process of migrating to a VuFind 2 solution.
Hi, I'm Eden Ojala from the National Library of Finland. I'm a developer there, and we have this ambitious project to provide a VuFind-based interface for all the libraries, museums, and archives in Finland. Yeah, it's crazy. We are in the process of migrating to VuFind 2 also, since we've used a customized version of VuFind 1. And this process has been going on now for over a year, but we are getting there real soon now. It seems that we made some mess with the VuFind 1 code, so I guess it's also good that we are having this opportunity to clean up our mess while we migrate. So it has taken a bit longer than we anticipated, but the result will be much better. And while at it, I'll say that we couldn't get two computers online with the same credentials anymore, so I guess there is another problem.
Well, nobody's used my my phone yet, so if somebody else needs to get on, we can make an arrangement over the break. And maybe we can pop over to. Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, my name is Alex Turp, and also from the National Library of Finland, and I'm a usability designer in this project, and also doing now some front-end developing. So we're doing the migration from the VuFind 1 version to number 2. And yeah, like Air said, it's quite a mess from number 1, so lots of challenges right now. But we're getting there.
Well, I hope that the new design helps make it harder to make messes, and I think that's a goal that we should continue to move toward, is